Local government elections are scheduled this year, and the new kid on the block, that's Action SA, says it's looking forward to contesting them. Now, the party says it wants to root out corruption in government. But to discuss the election and other political events set, of course, to shape the year, I'm joined by political commentator Oscar van Heerden. Also, thank you so much for your time, and good morning to you, and Happy New Year. How was the crossover?
It was fine. It was quiet but fine, and Happy New Year to you and, of course, to the viewers.
All right, thank you so much for that. Let's get into this, because I'm sure South Africans who are obviously the custodians of this country, the voters in the upcoming local government election, have quite an important decision to make here. I mean, what do you make of how the election might pan out, given the year that was 2020 politically?
Well, you hit the nail on the head there, Tumelo. You know, the year 2020 had been a trying year, a difficult year. I think mixed messages from commentators and pundits alike, from people on the streets, in terms of how President Ramaphosa's administration have been dealing with this. You would recall at the very beginning of the pandemic, lots of criticism around cigarettes, around alcohol, the bans and so forth. Was there need for a hard lockdown? And it's still very much up in the air. People are still debating the issue. However, I think that it is commonly accepted when we look around in the world that that hard lockdown was probably a necessity, even though some opposition parties would want to argue otherwise. This very second wave that we are now experiencing at this late stage suggests that if we did not do what we did as a country at the beginning of this pandemic, it could have been far worse. And so the jury is out, and I do think that it will have an impact on the local government elections. I think, the arrival of the vaccine in March or April is going to play a role. Of course, as you know, Tumelo, even the dosage that will come at that particular time is not going to be sufficient for everyone. So I do think that 2020 and the COVID pandemic, amongst other things, the economy and so on, will play a big part in the upcoming local government elections.
And what's your opinion on voter behavior? Because, I mean, in the past we have, seen how South Africans, when frustrated, particularly about issues around non-service delivery, whether it's corruption, just what's been going on politically and in government, they tend to step back and not vote as a way to protest elections. And that's been obviously a contention for debate, saying that, when you do not vote, then perhaps you don't have a say in what happens in the country. But with everything that has happened with the PPE, tender scandal last year, with the corruption we've seen around the asbestos deal, for example, some of the evidence brought forward at the Zondo Commission, how do you predict voter turnout will look like?
Well, I mean, I think the first point to make is that it is encouraging in our young democracy that people understand the power of their vote. We've seen in the last local government election the ANC being taught a lesson, losing metros, and it was because swaths of voters decided not to come to the voting stations and to punish the ANC as the ruling party. So it's good that voters understand that they have that power. The second point is that I do think that people are going to come out in their numbers. As you know, Tumelo, we recently had by-elections in a number of municipalities and wards, and people actually came out in their numbers. And I think this time around it's going to be the same. Of course, as to what the sentiment of voters are going to be, I think it is going to be the usual, those that argue the glass is half empty and others that argue the glass is half full. As you point out, indeed, there was the corruption about protective equipment around the coronavirus pandemic. Even in the midst of a pandemic, we find that there are those that are corrupt and that are stealing from the public purse. And I think that people do notice those negativities. But at the same time, those that argue the glass is half full will say that there is a Zondo Commission. The SIU has immediately clamped down on those corrupt elements, have exposed them. and we have already begun to see that we are retrieving some of the money that was stolen, and so on and so forth. So I think voters will be going to the ballot aware that, yes, there are the negatives, but there are also signs that we are a country that are trying to address these negatives and have a much more positive outlook. So it's going to be mixed feelings as usual.
Absolutely. And I think, if anything, we know that COVID-19 has exposed our systems, not only as a country, but even, as a continent. When you look at the health systems and how dilapidated they are, how there was absolutely no preparedness for a pandemic as this, as rapidly as it spread. I mean, it's definitely exposed a lot just in terms of what should have been done. I remember when stories were done, Oscar, around lack of sanitation, lack of water. South Africans were asking, how do we keep sanitized and how do we wash our hands when we don't have clean water? How do we stay indoors when we don't have housing, when we're squashed 8-10 members in one shack? If anything, what do you think COVID-19 has exposed as far as municipalities are concerned?
Well, exactly. It has brought to the fore the various deficiencies that exist within the system, be it within our basic education system, be it within the health sector, and indeed with peace and security. Bringing in the military, we saw the consequences of those at the beginning of the pandemic. So you are absolutely correct. I think the pandemic has brought to the fore a number of shortcomings and deficiencies, and I do think that what we need to learn from this process is that indeed we not only have to fix those things, but at the same time have to be prepared for another wave, because we simply don't know what kind of virus in a year or 2 or 3 might actually come and cause havoc again amongst the population. And so I think that this is going to be a session, if we finally get through the storm, to sit down and reflect how best can we actually plug some of these holes that indeed the pandemic has exposed.
Well, good talking to you. Thank you so much for your time and Happy New Year. That's, of course, Dr. Oscar van Heerden.